Two.
Police are here. It might be a little more serious than we thought.
Need some medical help, okay?
The film opens with a reporter named Angela, who along with her cameraman, is preparing to film a special segment at a local fire station. Angela hosts a television program that highlights nighttime professions, jobs that take place while most of the world sleeps. For this episode, she's been given rare access to follow the lives of firefighters during their overnight shift. Upon arrival, Angela is greeted by the fire chief. During their conversation, he explains that contrary to public belief, most of a firefighter's duties are not related to putting out fires. In fact, the majority of their calls involve medical emergencies, such as accidents or heart attacks. He then introduces Angela to two young firefighters, Jake and George, both charismatic and friendly, who immediately start flirting with Angela in a playful manner. Jake and George enthusiastically give Angela and her cameraman a tour of the station. They show her their recreation room, shower facilities, and dormitories where they sleep during shifts. Jake adds that firefighters often work 48-hour shifts, which means there's a good chance Angela will get to witness them respond to an actual emergency. To lighten the mood, George challenges Angela to a race to see who can put on a firefighter's gear the fastest. Angela excitedly accepts the challenge, and everyone laughs and enjoys the moment. But the fun is suddenly interrupted by the blaring of a fire alarm, indicating an emergency call. Jake and George quickly suit up and prepare to leave. Within minutes, they're aboard the fire truck, racing through the streets toward the reported address. They arrive at an old apartment building that already feels tense and uneasy. Two police officers are waiting at the entrance. One of them explains that neighbors had called because they heard disturbing screams from an elderly woman who lives alone. Several anxious residents have gathered on the ground floor, worried about what might be happening. The officers lead the way upstairs and break down the door to the woman's apartment. Inside, they find her in a state of panic, with her face covered in blood. As they attempt to calm her down, she suddenly lashes out and bites one of the officers violently. Jake quickly lifts the injured officer and carries him downstairs, while George stays behind to deal with the woman. But when Jake and the others reach the lobby, they're shocked to find the building has been sealed off from the outside. In the middle of the confusion, a woman holding her sick daughter explains that her husband is outside with crucial medication for their child. Unfortunately, he's not being allowed in. A resident who happens to be a veterinarian steps forward and begins treating the injured officer as best he can. Suddenly, a body crashes to the ground from the upper floor. It's George, his body broken and mangled. Jake rushes to George and checks his pulse. Remarkably, he's still alive, though in critical condition. But with the building under lockdown, there's no way to get him medical help. The remaining officer, Danny, accompanies Angela and her cameraman back upstairs. There they find the old woman wandering the hallway, her teeth bared and eyes wild. They repeatedly warn her to stop, but she continues to charge toward them. Finally, Danny is forced to shoot her. The group begins knocking on residents' doors to gather everyone together on the ground floor. In one of the apartments, they find another woman, who is visibly ill, and help her downstairs. Before leaving, Jake notices a rat scurrying in the room, and it nearly bites him. Suspicious, Angela demands that Jake tell her the truth about what's happening. Reluctantly, Jake reveals that the building is now under quarantine due to a suspected biological threat. The news throws the residents into panic. One of them points out that none of their phones, TVs, or radios are working anymore. Another tenant mentions there might be another way out, through a window on the second floor. They make their way to the window, but as they approach, they're met by an armed soldier aiming his weapon at them. Angela shouts that they're recording everything, and the public will see how the military is treating innocent civilians. The soldier says nothing, and begins sealing the windows with plastic sheeting. Danny soon arrives, and orders everyone to return downstairs. Angela obeys, but continues filming everything, determined to document the truth. The veterinarian continues treating the wounded, but notes that their conditions are deteriorating rapidly. He also finds it difficult to believe that an elderly woman could inflict such serious injuries on two grown men. The symptoms seem increasingly abnormal. Angela interviews a young girl, who despite the chaos, remains remarkably brave. The girl reveals that her father is out with their dog, who had fallen ill and needed a vet. Her mother adds that the daughter had also been sick for several weeks. Angela then interviews a voice teacher, who lives with his best student. Tension escalates further, when George, who had been unconscious and badly injured, suddenly stands up. Despite his broken bones, he starts walking stiffly, with foam pouring from his mouth. They quickly force him back into the room. The vet concludes that George and the sick woman are both showing signs of rabies, but something doesn't add up. Rabies typically takes months to show symptoms, yet in these cases it's only been a few hours. He warns that if anyone is bitten or exposed to the blood or saliva of an infected person, they could become infected too. Angela asks if rabies shots can cure the infected, but the vet grimly explains that once symptoms appear, it's already too late. Amid the growing fear, a male lawyer decides to isolate himself in his apartment, convinced it's safer. Angela and the others try to stop him, but he gets into the elevator anyway. Just as the doors are about to close, a large infected dog leaps in and attacks him. The others are completely powerless to save the lawyer, as the infected dog viciously mauls him to death in front of their horrified eyes. The sound of tearing flesh and agonized screams fills the air, paralyzing everyone in place. Suddenly, the sick woman, who had earlier appeared incapacitated and barely conscious, reappears in a violent frenzy and launches herself at Angela and her cameraman with terrifying speed. In a desperate moment of self-defense, the cameraman has no choice but to strike back, killing her just before she can sink her teeth into either of them. Her blood splashes violently across the camera lens and onto Angela's shirt, staining both with the gruesome aftermath of what they were forced to do. Shaken and filled with guilt, the cameraman stares in disbelief at what he's done, overwhelmed by remorse. But Angela, summoning calm resolve in the chaos, reassures him that he did what had to be done, that it was them or her, and none of it is his fault. Downstairs, Officer Danny gathers everyone into the lobby to announce that CDC agents will soon enter the building to conduct infection tests. Once everyone has been cleared, he promises they'll be permitted to leave. Relief is mixed with tension as people cling to that hope, but the veterinarian steps forward with grim news. There is no way to test for rabies in a living person without extracting a brain tissue sample, which requires drilling directly into the skull. The revelation sends chills through the group. Danny, visibly stressed but trying to maintain authority, insists that this outbreak isn't rabies at all, dismissing the vet's concerns outright. To restore order, he organizes a roll call to determine who is missing or presumed dead. During this tense accounting, the landlord solemnly notes that the reclusive tenant from the attic hasn't been seen in months, possibly long gone, or perhaps something far worse. Soon after, a CDC agent arrives and proceeds to drill into George's skull, just as the vet had described, right in front of the uneasy residents. This disturbing and invasive scene confirms the veterinarian's terrifying claim. But to everyone's shock, mere moments after the procedure, George inexplicably rises from the table, moving, growling, no longer himself. The CDC officer immediately panics and retreats from the room, slamming and locking the door behind him, unintentionally trapping the veterinarian inside. The vet bangs on the door in desperation, pleading to be let out, insisting he wasn't bitten, but his cries go ignored. The CDC officer, prioritizing containment, walks away as George lunges at the vet, violently mauling him in an explosion of blood and scream. Now shaken, the officer explains to the group what brought them to this apartment building in the first place. A sick dog, brought to a veterinary clinic, had suddenly become violently aggressive and began attacking other animals. Using the information on its collar, the CDC tracked the infection back here. That dog, it turns out, belonged to a tenant in this very building, hence the immediate emergency quarantine. This revelation hits the group like a bomb. A wave of fury spreads, and the remaining residents confront the mother and her young daughter, accusing them of hiding the dog's illness. The mother, trembling, insists that her daughter only has bronchitis and is not infected. But before anyone can respond, the girl suddenly snaps, turning and biting her own mother on the shoulder in a terrifying burst of violence. Bleeding and in utter shock, the mother shoves her daughter away, screaming for her to run and hide before the CDC finds her. Reacting swiftly, the CDC officer orders Danny and Jake to find and capture the girl for containment and further study. Angela and the cameraman follow closely as they race upstairs. Danny eventually discovers the child hiding inside a dark, narrow closet. He speaks softly, cautiously approaching her in hopes of calming her. But as she turns to face him, the truth is impossible to deny. Her eyes are glowing a deep, unnatural crimson. She is infected. Before Danny can react, she launches at him and bites down hard. Jake rushes in, and without a second thought, kills the girl with a brutal swing of his axe, ending the nightmare. Back downstairs, chaos erupts. Infected residents begin flooding the halls from every direction, overwhelming the last of the survivors. They scramble into a room and barricade the door behind them, Tensions rise when it becomes clear that both the CDC officer and the student have been bitten. In one final desperate attempt to escape, the opera teacher tries to climb out through a window, but he is instantly gunned down by a sniper stationed outside. His lifeless body drops with a thud, sending a chilling message: no one leave. Angela, horrified, realizes the military outside has no intention of letting anyone out alive, infected or not. If they want to survive, they must find another escape route and they head downward, hoping to slip past the infected, only to discover that even more residents, now including the mother, have turned. The infected student attacks Angela in a frenzied ambush, nearly overpowering her. Jake and the cameraman fight her off with everything they have. Jake finally delivers a fatal neck twist, snapping her spine and killing her instantly. Angela collapses, overwhelmed by fear and the possibility she might have been bitten. The cameraman checks her thoroughly and breathes a sigh of relief. She's still clean. The landlord quietly pulls Jake aside and confesses that there may be a secret way out through the basement. But before they can act, the now infected CDC officer attacks and kills the landlord in front of his wife. Frozen with grief, refuses to abandon her husband's body and is quickly taken by the infected as well. Angela and the cameraman sprint to the lobby's mailboxes to retrieve the basement keys, narrowly avoiding infected, who now roam the hall. But just as they grab the keys, the infected landlord ambushes them, biting into Jake's arm. Angela and the cameraman are left with no choice but to abandon him. Now alone, the last two survivors flee upward, desperately seeking refuge in the attic apartment. Inside, they find the answers they've been searching for. Scattered across the room are makeshift lab stations, disturbing photographs, and newspaper clippings. The story unfolds. The tenant who lived here was a member of a doomsday cult that had broken into a top-secret military facility and stolen an experimental virus, an engineered, weaponized strain of rabies. As the landlord had said, that tenant had vanished months ago. The virus likely passed first to rats, then to household pets, and finally to the little girl. Suddenly, the entire building is plunged into total darkness. Angela stumbles, disoriented and panicked. The cameraman switches on the night vision function on his camera and tries to guide her through the eerie silence. Then, without warning, a trapdoor creaks open, and a grotesque, skeletal figure silently slinks into the room. With a horrifying slap, it knocks the camera out of his hand. It clatters to the ground but continues to record. Through the lens, we see the twisted, emaciated figure, the missing tenant, now fully mutated, its body contorted from months of living with the virus. The creature attacks the cameraman. Angela, trembling, picks up the fallen camera and looks through it, only to see the monster devouring her friend. A scream tears from her throat. She drops the camera and collapses. The device continues rolling, capturing the final chilling image. Angela, paralyzed by fear, is dragged kicking and screaming into the impenetrable darkness, leaving only the hum of the camera and the echoes of horror behind.